The concept of truth setting you free comes from the belief that knowing and confronting reality, even if painful or uncomfortable, leads to liberation, growth, and empowerment. Lies, on the other hand, create barriers, distort reality, and perpetuate oppression. In this case, lies are institutionalized through false narratives, biased laws, or the rewriting of history to erase or delegitimize certain groups' identities. However, the truth remains powerful because, when individuals and communities reclaim their history, identity, and truth, they break through the chains of those lies. The process of discovering truth often involves unearthing hidden histories, recognizing patterns of erasure, confronting the power structures that have upheld those falsehoods when discussing paper genocide, and the manipulation of history, particularly in the context of colonialism. This idea takes on an even more profound meaning. Some narratives perpetuate the idea that black individuals are the oppressors of white counterparts, a perception of black empowerment as a threat to white existence rather than a rightful reclamation of identity and legacy, a deliberate strategy in popular culture that honors its diverse histories and works toward true equity for all. This aligns with the concept of spiritual wickedness in high places. Those who have achieved a certain level of success may find themselves caught between their identity and their ambition, choosing to uphold systems that benefit them personally, even at the expense of their community. This betrayal perpetuates a cycle of oppression, as they may actively participate in discrediting grassroots movements or initiatives aimed at empowering black individuals. Another layer to this complex dynamic involves individuals within the black community who, motivated by personal gain, align themselves with the very systems that oppress their brothers and sisters. These puppets or pawns often occupy positions of influence, whether in politics, media, or business, and may compromise their community's interests for profit or status. They become conduits for the very narratives that perpetuate division, willingly promoting the agenda of those in positions of influence aligning with oppressive forces. Laws and policies have been crafted to systematically form political power or from being recognized as legitimate communities. Elements of indigenous and African cultures have often been appropriated by white society, a poignant allegory for contemporary societal dynamics while stripping the original cultural context, significance, rights and heritage, but also excluded them from legal protections or treaty rights tied to their native status. By framing the struggle as a white versus black dichotomy, the true complexities of social and economic disparities are obscured. This creates a narrative where white individuals may feel victimized, shifting attention away from the structural injustices faced by black individuals and communities. This illusion of oppression portrayal often serves to distract from the historical realities of systemic racism and inequality that continue to affect black communities. This fictitious narrative fosters division, requires a collective effort to confront and dismantle the systems of oppression, inasmuch as the General Allotment Act, Dawes Act, of 1887 that illegally sold divided communal land off by the government, recognized or taken cultural genocide, as generations grew up disconnected from their indigenous heritage, enacted policies to force assimilation of indigenous peoples and other marginalized groups into white society, erasing their cultural and ethnic identity in the process, further dispossessing native communities. Historically, indigenous people and people of color have been subjected to such erasure in the United States and other colonial systems, where governments imposed policies that diminished or destroyed their identities in official documents, education, and representation. For the marginalized, reclaiming the truth can be an act of resistance against systems that have sought to suppress their identity. Paper genocide refers to the systematic erasure or denial of a group's identity and history through legal, bureaucratic, or cultural means, often involving records, classifications, and laws that strip a people of their ethnic or racial identity. These attempts, which stem from colonialism, racism, and efforts to consolidate power, often result in the systematic destruction or diminishing of the identity, rights, and recognition of certain groups representing colonial powers and white-dominated institutions, historically attempted manifestation of paper genocide in several ways. The pursuit of truth becomes a way to dismantle the systems that uphold the lies, even when they are deeply entrenched in law, education, or societal norms. It's also a pathway to healing and empowerment, as knowing one's true story and history can ignite movements for justice and recognition. In the context of indigenous peoples, the racial tensions and historical oppression that resonate in the narrative can be seen in various forms, revealing a complex interplay of power, manipulation, and betrayal. Indigenous children were taken from their families and placed in institutions where they were forbidden to speak their languages, practice their religions, or maintain their cultural traditions. This form of deception prevents the oppressed from accessing the truth about their heritage, struggles, and rightful place in society. It also serves those in power, maintaining control and perpetuating inequality. Reclassified misclassification as colored or black, U.S. government and colonial powers kept controlled census data, often deliberately omitting their names to control the legal recognition of who could claim indigenous identity and, as a result, their rights to land, resources, and sovereignty. By controlling what history is taught and whose stories are told, not only erases the truth but also reinforces a dominant narrative that excludes or dehumanizes the presence and contributions of indigenous and marginalized groups from the historical record. School curriculums, media, and public discourse often downplay or ignore the histories of colonized peoples, leading to a form of cultural erasure that feeds into paper genocide, stripping communities of the ability to advocate for themselves or protect their lands, languages, and cultures. This disenfranchisement allowed laws that facilitated theft of land, resources, and treaties frequently broken by manipulating legal definitions of identity. White-dominated governments entitled to land or compensation. This led to a massive loss of land holding. Tactics of manipulation instill fear and resentment, leading to further polarization within society. History textbooks in the U.S. often portray a Eurocentric narrative that glorifies colonial expansion while minimizing the violence and destruction caused to indigenous peoples and African descendants. Boarding schools for Native American children are a well-known example, aimed to kill the Indian, save the man, stripping Native children of their culture, language, and identity, leading to a loss of traditions, languages, and community ties. While indigenous culture is commodified, the real struggles of recognition and justice are ignored to maintain power, exploit resources, and prevent these groups from claiming their rightful place in society. Symbols, spiritual practices, and attire are often appropriated, a deliberate strategy in popular sports teams using indigenous mascots to fashion brands copying sacred designs. However, resistance efforts, whether through reclaiming history, challenging legal definitions, or cultural revival, continue to push back against these forms of erasure, particularly indigenous and African descendants. Parallels between a commitment to honesty and a rejection of the false dichotomy that seeks to pit one race against another highlights the urgent need for awareness, unity, and resilience within the Black community. The struggle for identity and justice remains a critical issue. Acknowledging the manipulation of narratives and the betrayal from within, communities can work toward a future where their legacies are celebrated and their voices are unified. True leadership must be rooted in solidarity and a commitment to uplifting all members of the community rather than selling out for personal gain.